Yeah.
Hi, welcome to Board Game Express. Today we're going to rules blitz Caylus. Now, Caylus is a worker placement Euro game where you're going to be collecting resources, these cubes, as well as coins, in order to be building tiles out onto the board, and finally castle pieces to satisfy the king's wishes. And the player with the most prestige points at the end wins. Now, in a turn of Caylus, the first thing that happens is all players will collect income. The default is 2 gold, and any of these residence buildings that you've built later in the game will also add to that income. So everyone takes 2. And then in turn order, players will place workers onto the action spaces here, including the castle. Now, the cost of placing a worker is going to be whatever the lowest number showing on the bridge is. So in the beginning of the game, and throughout most of it, it's going to be 1 coin. So every time you place a worker, you're going to pay a coin. Just as a thing, I tend to fiddle with some of my game pieces as I play games, so if it's something you tend to do, you can kind of just grab this as a set and just remind you every time you place a worker, you got to pay $1. Now, everyone will keep placing in order until players choose to pass. The first player who passes, so let's say green chooses first, is going to collect 1 coin as a reward. And now, if the other players want to keep placing workers, the cost has increased to 2. So generally, once 1 or 2 players pass, it begins a little bit of a cascade, and everyone starts passing very quickly after that, so on and so forth. Now, when everyone's passed, now it's time to execute everything along the trail in the order following, ending with the castle. So, in the gate, the player who put his pawn here can now choose to go to any other empty space that is still available. Here you just collect 3 coins. Here you get to move what is called the provost piece forward or backwards up to 3 spaces. Here is the joust. You can, if you have the payment, you can purchase King's Favors. We'll explain what that is in a moment. Here is where you fight for turn order. So the players who go here will go first, second, and third next turn. All players not will just simply drop to the end of the line. This is where you try to go to the inn. The first turn you go in here, you're just going to wait until it executes, and then you slide over to this spot over here. While a pawn is in here, that player always pays 1 coin per worker, regardless of how many of his opponents have passed. So that's what the point of this is. At any future time, if you don't want to stay there when it's time to execute, you can choose to voluntarily leave, even if no one kicks you out. Alright, next is the Provost War, as I like to say. In the order of passing, so green, blue, red, each player can choose to pay coins to move the provost up or down 3 spaces. So 3 backwards, 3 forwards, and then the next player, and then the next. So there's a little bit of power in being the last player to pass, in that you are the person who finally gets to commit to where this piece is. Now, the reason this is important is because all of the action spaces after the bridge could potentially be affected by this provost, in that only these spaces before, so previous to, or on the provost trigger. So in this case, if there were a worker here, 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 it would trigger. Any workers placed here, here, or even in any future buildings that get built, would not activate this turn. So this is a bit of a nasty little thing to be careful of, and very, very important, but also very difficult to control. Now, once all of the buildings in the trail have been activated, then it's time to build castle pieces. Everybody who has put one of their workers here is allowed to build as many castle pieces as they can pay for. Each castle piece is going to cost 1 pink cube, as well as 2 other cubes of different colors. So here are the 3 typical combinations. Pink with a wood and a stone, pink with a wood and a cloth, pink with a stone and a cloth. And you place your buildings in here. So let's say green started building castles. Each castle piece you build, you would put a house here to represent that you did so. You're going to earn the victory points for the zone. So in the beginning of the game, there were 5 points each. And then after everyone has had a chance to build, you're going to execute the Best Builder of the Turn award. So whichever player built the greatest number of pieces, that player is going to earn 1 king's favor. Now, if any player put any workers here and chose not to, or due to the Provost War previously, was not able to earn the cubes necessary to build a castle piece, you're going to lose 2 victory points for disappointing the king. However, you cannot fall below 0. So, and then, after all of that is done, you're going to look over here to move the bailiff, who is essentially the turn order counter, the turn counter, I should say. He will move 1 space forward if the provost is on or before him in the ending spot. If the provost happened to be pushed ahead of him, then he will actually move 2 spaces forward, and in either event, the provost is going to join him on top. Everyone take their workers back. Make sure you remember to adjust turn order, and then you're going to go again. Income, place workers, and execute. Now, when the bailiff arrives at one of these 3 era markers, so this is the dungeon marker, then it is time to score the end of the era. The end of the era will also score in the event the entire castle section for that era is filled. So this first era of dungeon, you're going to score it either when the bailiff reaches this space or beyond, or if all 6 of these spaces are filled. And so on and so forth for the other eras. As soon as the section is filled, regardless of where the bailiff is, you will do a scoring. And to do a scoring, you follow the chart down here. Anybody who did not place a castle piece in the beginning, you're going to lose victory points. But if you did build the number that they want, so 2 here or more, you're going to earn a favor. And in the next zone, you're going to be able to earn more favors, and so on and so forth. Now, a couple other details about building in the castles. First, if the zone that you're currently trying to build in fills up, you are allowed to keep building. You just go ahead and fill the next space. So if 5 of these spaces are filled and you put 1 here, and then you want to build another castle piece, you build 1 here, you're only going to get 4 victory points for that second one. However, both of the ones that you built will count for the purposes of who built the most for the turn. Also, the final era, the 14 spaces in the tower spot, that is a game constraint. You're only allowed to build 14, and anybody who goes into the castle after that's finished is simply out of luck, and you may not build. Now, if that causes you not to build for the turn, you will not get the -2 penalty, because the king is not disappointed in you. The king is simply happy that his castle has been finished, so you don't have to worry about that. Now, let's talk about the favors. Every time you earn a favor, whether you bought one here, whether you won the best builder of the turn, whether you're counting the era, or even some buildings, when you build them, will come with favors. You choose 1 row to advance your pawn, so let's say blue earned a favor, and then you would score whatever it is you land on. So the top is victory points, 1, 2, etc. The second row is money. The third row is cubes. And whenever you advance, so the first time you earn a favor on the resource row, you're going to earn 1 pink cube. If you advance a second time, you can always choose a reward previous to where you landed. So if you move up a second time on the resource row, you can take a wood or a stone, or you can simply take a pink. You're still allowed. And if you advance again, now you can take any of the 4. And finally, the last row requires a little bit more of an explanation. This row doesn't give you anything in the beginning, so it might not look attractive, but it actually is pretty important, because this is how you build more buildings without having to use the action spaces, such as these, that allow you to build. This symbol means build a wood building without paying the wood, and this is build a stone building without paying the stone, and etc., etc. Now, if you advance along the track, you can once again always choose a reward prior to the one that you just landed on. So if you land here, you can build a wood building, and if you land here, you can choose to build a stone, or you can say I want that instead and choose to build a wood. Now finally, if you ever earn multiple favors in the exact same time, so for example, it's most common when you do end of era scoring, then you must choose different rows. So if I earn 2 at once, I have to pick 2 different rows. So maybe victory points and a resource, whatever. Also, you'll notice these little double bars right here. What that basically does is it restricts how much you can get for your favors. in the first era, until you have concluded it and scored the dungeon, this thing right here, you may not pass this double bar over here. So if I were to choose coins as a reward, I get 3, I get 4, and until this scoring happens, if I choose this again, I would not actually move up. I would simply take 4 again. And then so on for era 2. If you have not yet finished this, you may not move past the double bars here. Now, at the end of the game, if you have reached the end of one of the favorite tracks and you want to choose it again, you can. You simply earn whatever reward is underneath, or if it's one of these, underneath or to the left. So in particular, for example, if you reach the top of the prestige point row, you'll score 5, and then if you choose to tap that row again, you'll keep scoring 5 victory points every time. That can add up very quickly if you're able to earn a lot of favors. All right. Now, at the end of the game, which will trigger either when the bailiff reaches here or beyond, or the castle section here is filled, then all of your leftover points are going to be cashed out. So coins will earn a point, 4 cubes, and finally every gold that you have unused is going to be worth 3 points. Gold is typically used to build the prestige buildings. That's kind of what you want them for. Now, a final detail about building. So these spaces are what give you permission to build. So let's pretend you built a wooden building. To build a wooden building, you pay whatever it costs up here in the corner. So wood, and the white represents that you can pay any resource of your choice, so 2 cubes. When you build it, go ahead and claim it. So let's say red built this. You're going to score victory points right away, and this will become an available action in the future. And in this way, the town's going to keep growing with more and more buildings over time. Now, there's kind of an important reason why you want to build buildings. Now, 2 points may not feel like a lot. You may think initially, well, hey, 2 cubes gets me, 4 points in this case. But I can get 5 points by building in the castle with 3 cubes. So what gives? Well, there are 2 benefits to building buildings. First, anytime an opponent places a worker on one of your buildings, you're going to get 1 victory point as compensation. So blue goes here, red gets a point. This actually happens regardless of whether blue is able to collect later on due to the movement of the provost. So even if blue is prevented from getting this, red still gets that victory point. The second benefit is if you build a building, you always get to use it for 1. So no matter how many of opponents may have already passed, normally you would have to pay 3 to place a worker. If it's your own building, you always pay 1, no matter what. So those are 2 benefits to building buildings. Now, I will say this, because of this mechanic, it may feel like you don't want to use your opponent's buildings because you're simply going to give them points. But the thing to consider is that twofold. 1, if you don't use it, one of your other opponents might use it. So if blue's like, hey, I don't want to give red points, green may be like, I don't care, I'll give red a point, and then get the benefit. Another problem is if you have a good building and you are trying to avoid it, that just means the person who built it gets the building pretty much scot-free, and that's not a good result either. So just because someone built a building doesn't mean you should always avoid it. So just kind of understand that. All right, and so go ahead and use your workers efficiently, collect resources, use them for buildings and castle pieces, and then earn the king's favor along the way to score the most points. And now you know how to play Caylus.